No, the title is not clickbait. I've actually closed a 9K deal with no results, no case studies, no testimonials, no nothing. And if you stay until the end of this video, you're gonna learn how to do it yourself as well because it's really simple. So, first, let me just tell you a little story. So, I had this call booked with a prospect, and she came on a call, and then she told me at the beginning of the call, she told me like, Gabriel, I've been burned in the past really bad. I'm quite skeptical. I've tried a lot of coaching programs. A lot of them promised me a lot of results, but none of them actually delivered on results. So long story short, the prospect was, really skeptical. She got skimmed in the past. She got burned really bad by, huge coaches with, huge names, and she didn't get any results at all. Basically, she wasn't successful in her business, right? So she told me, I've tried all of these programs. I didn't get any results. They promised me everything, but they didn't deliver anything. Just tried this all of these biggest coaches. So look, I'm not gonna buy. I'm really skeptical. I'm not gonna buy. Your offer and whatever. But basically, just want to see what you have, right? So I said, okay, that's not a problem, right? Let's talk about your challenges in the business. Let's see if I can even help you in the first place, and then we can take it from there, right? So, we kind of conducted the call. Then obviously I asked the questions. I understood her problem, and then I made the clear argument and just demonstrated to her how I can help her. And obviously that's what I'm going to show you in this video. But what ended up happening is she purchased the program on a call, right? She purchased my offer, my product on the call. She paid in full. And then she was like, Gabriel, I had no idea this was actually what was going on with my business. And I'm really excited to actually get results with you because I truly believe and I truly understand, how is it that I'm going to get a result. So she completely went 180 from the beginning of the call, just telling me that she's not going to buy. She's really skeptical. She got burned in the past, right? So really negative experience. And then until the end of the call, she basically turned 180 and she just told me like, thank you so much for showing me this and just helping me out. So actually giving me the opportunity to get the results. So she made a 180, and I'm gonna show you in this video how exactly I did it. So let's get into the first step. First step is all about establishing prospects, problems, and goals. So this maybe sounds, really simple, really stupid. It's like, okay, well, duh, right? But here's the deal, right? So whenever you jump on a sales call, you want to sell a high-ticket offer. First of all, you need to find out what is the problem. Okay, if there's no problem, there is no sale. And you do not want to stop until you identify the problem. So how you would do that is really simple. You would just ask them, okay, so what is the biggest challenge in the business right now? Really simple. Okay, and then you find out what's the challenge. Now, in this scenario, to kind of go after, with the client that I just signed, obviously her problem was client acquisition. She just couldn't get clients, right? This is usually the problem for coaches, consultants, agency owners, right? They want to grow their business. So she told me, hey, look, my biggest problem is getting clients. I just cannot get clients. I cannot get book calls, right? This is how the problem is looking like and stuff like that, right? So then I found out what is the problem, right? Obviously, I took note of that. I took a mental note as well. The biggest problem is client acquisition. So obviously, this is going to apply to any type of offer that you would sell. If it's fitness, dating, whatever it is, you first of all got to find out what is the problem. Okay, what is the biggest problem specifically, right? After that, we got to find out what is the goal, right? We need to find out what is the goal. So here, obviously, you would just ask like, okay, and what is your biggest goal with the business, right? And obviously, again, this is you're going to need to adapt this based on your offer, essentially, right? Depending on what offer you have, it's going to work. So her goal specifically was to get to 10K per month, to get clients, right? Because she didn't get any clients at all with her offer. So her goal was 10K per month. So the biggest problem was she's not able to get clients. She's not able to get book calls for her offer. And her biggest goal is to sign clients, to get to 10K per month, and so on. So this is literally the first step, okay? This is kind of like surface level, right? Like, first of all, you just want to get a grasp of like, okay, what's going on? Okay, what is the problem? What is the goal? Okay, and this is kind of help you to guide the conversation as well. So this is literally the first step. Really simple, nothing complicated. Now, the second step after this is to clearly diagnose the prospect's problem and chunk down. Now, let me explain what I mean by that, right? So the client just told you, okay, and again, this first step is pretty surface level, right? You just kind of want to get an idea of it, right? So the client told me then, okay, well, Okay, the biggest problem is client acquisition. The next step for me, the second step is I want to find out, I want to diagnose the problem. Okay, I want to find out, okay, what's actually going on? What's causing this problem? And I want to chunk down. And what I mean by chunk down is I'm going to start to ask specific questions so that I can understand what causes the problem and what the problem looks like. So this is what chunking down is. Okay, so I'm going to start asking questions like, okay, well, you're not able to get clients. Is it because you're not booking enough calls, right? So that you can sign clients? Or is it that you're booking calls, but you're struggling to close them? Like, is it a sales problem? Is it an appointment booking problem? Like, what is your show up rate? What do you do to sign the clients? What do you do to book the calls? What is your offer? What do you, so I start asking all of these specific questions so that I can diagnose the problem and I can truly understand it on a deeper level. Okay, this is the second step. We start to get one level deeper, and we try to understand like what are the circumstances, right, of the problem. Like, okay, what is your niche? What is your offer? How do you book calls? What is your show up rate? What is your closing rate? What is your price point? Who's your ideal client, right? Like every single little thing. And I'm going to ask a lot of questions because here I truly, genuinely want to understand the problem. And here you start to get a grasp of like what's going on, and you should be an expert, obviously, at your offer. Well, this is why you sell the offer, right? So you, at this point, you need to start understanding like what causes the prospect's problem. Okay, what is the real reason for the problem? Okay, and so in your mind, you already start to understand the problem. You already start to understand what's going on, and then you start to build automatically like an argument for like, hey, this is why the problem is a problem. This is what causes it, and this is what you need to do to kind of fix the problem. So here again, you truly need to understand like what is the real cause of the problem. Okay, so it's kind of like you went to a doctor, right? So like the doctor first of all is going to ask you like preliminary questions like what's your age, whatever it might be, like weight. I don't know what a doctor would ask you, but this is like the service level. This is step one. Now for the second step, he's going to start asking more specific questions like, okay, did you do like blood tests, right? Did you do this? Like he's basically going to start looking at your metrics like whatever, heart rate, right? Stuff like that. So he gets more specific because he needs to understand the problem, and he's going to ask you multiple questions from multiple different angles, and this is basically what you do in the second step. Now at this point, again, you should understand what is the problem specifically, and you should understand exactly what's causing the problem. It's really important. Then we get into the third step, and the third step is, again, it kind of ties into the last one, but this is like a deeper level, right? Is you understand what the problem looks like, right? You pretty much understand everything about them. You understand every single angle of the problem, how the problem manifests, right? If it affects other areas of their life, and so on. Here, the next step is going to be to discover the real root cause for the problem. And this is where things start to get interesting, because usually prospects will come to the call and they will think that the problem is X. Okay, X, whatever it might be, right? They might blame it on the market, right? They might blame it on their thyroid problems if they sell like a weight loss offer, whatever. They will say that the problem X is X. But in reality, almost like 99% of the cases, the real problem is not X, the real problem is Y. Okay, so in this step, in the third step, you need to start identifying what is the real problem, because again, 99% of the times, in most cases, prospects will not know what is the real problem. They will think it's something else, because in the first place, if they were aware that X was the problem, they would have solved it in the first place and they wouldn't be on a call with you, right? But they don't know what is the real problem and what's going on. So the problem is Y. Now you need to start identifying, and in this step, you need to start making the difference between X problem, what the prospect is telling you, what they think the problem is, and Y, which is the real root cause problem that the prospect is not aware of. So here you might even ask them questions like, okay, and why do you think is it that you have this problem, right? So that you get a grasp of like, what is the X problem that the prospect thinks they have, but is not the real problem. So you have that, and in your mind, in the back of your mind, you already should know like, okay, this is the real problem, okay, for this prospect specifically. The real problem is Y. And so here you need to start making that gap again, just like understand this is X problem, what the prospect thinks about, this is Y problem, what is the real problem. They're not aware of it, so you should be prepared to kind of present that argument like, hey, look, the real problem is not X, is Y, here's why, and logically explain it. So here again, you discover the real reason why the prospect failed, and this is going to be the root cause of the problem. Okay, again, is the real problem, and if you solve why, which is the real root cause of the problem, then the problem is going to be solved for the client, and they're going to be able to achieve their goal, because this is really the only thing that they care about, to essentially solve the problem and to achieve the goal. So in this instance specifically, is that the client's offer was broken. So let me just give you an example, right, of like an X and Y problem. So X problem in prospect's perspective, right, in my client's perspective, was that, she couldn't get clients because she couldn't get in front of the right people, and the prospects could not afford her offer. This was X problem, right? And then she said, hey, look, the reason why I think the real reason why I don't get clients, because I just cannot find the right people for my offer, and because people don't have money to pay for my offer. So this was the X problem, the problem that the prospect, was thinking they have. But the real problem was Y, and the real problem was that, her offer was broken, and she was basically trying to go after a market that didn't truly need what she was selling. And also the market wasn't the best one. They didn't have the best financial situation, and this is why they could not afford the offer either. So the whole offer was bad because the market was bad, and all of these coaches, all of these other things that she tried in the past, all of them, they tried to make the offer fancy. They tried to install all of these fancy client acquisition systems, but the fundamentals were broken. So no matter how many strategies you were trying, you just couldn't get offer to work, and this was the real problem. And so, as you can see, you start to build up the argument, right? You start to build the argument, like what's actually going on in the business, and this is what you need to have at this point. Now let's get into the next one, which is the step 4. Here's where you want to present the new cause, right? It's not this, it's that. And what I mean by new cause is exactly this. So we've talked about the X problem and the Y problem. So in this step, you want to present it, right? Because previously you started to become aware of it, and you clearly understand, like, okay, X problem is the surface level problem that's not real. Y problem is the real problem that's actually causing all of these bottlenecks in the business. Now, in step 3, you had that in your mind. In step 4, you need to tell this to the prospect, and you need to present it, okay? And obviously you would do this in a pitch. It's not necessarily coaching, but you just present the argument. So at this stage, you need to start educating the prospect a little bit, but you're not educating just for the sake of educating. You're educating for the purpose of selling to them, and just clearly demonstrating how is it that you can help them, and why is it that the previous things that they've tried failed. So at this point, what I did is I started to talk to them, and I started to tell them, hey, look, the real problem is not that you are not getting in front of the right people. And the real problem is not that the people who you are targeting don't have the money. That is not the real problem, okay? That is a symptom. The root cause of the problem, why problem, is that your offer is fundamentally broken because you're trying to go after the wrong market. So we need to rebuild your offer. We need to choose a different market. And this is how we're going to make this offer to work, because fundamentally is like you're trying to sell burgers to a vegan audience. It's not going to work. It doesn't make any sense. Regardless if you have the best burgers in the world, it just doesn't make any sense. This is why the offer is fundamentally broken. And what the previous coaches that I work with try to do is they try to install like really fancy webinars and marketing systems into your business and all of those things, when in fact fundamentally the offer was broken. So it's just kind of like, you're trying to sell a burger to a vegan, it doesn't really work, and then you try to put like, okay, have the best prices, like put the best like sauce on it, or like the best french fries on the side, or whatever, but they're still not going to buy because fundamentally they don't want the burger. No matter what you do, they're not going to buy. So this is how you need to present the new cause. Okay, you're just presenting, you're starting to educate the prospect, and you're starting to make them aware that, hey, look, the real problem is not X, the real problem is Y. And you start to explain why. You need to justify why. You're not just going to say like, hey, look, the real problem is not this, is that, and that's it. No, you need to clearly explain why is that the case. You need to make the case for it. It's just like, you're presenting your case in court. You need to clearly demonstrate and build up the argument like one brick on top of the other, so that you clearly demonstrate your argument, and you show it that, you clearly demonstrate that it's true and that it's actually the case. And this is what you need to do in this step. So you need to, again, present the new cause, which is the real reason why they failed, okay? So the new cause is essentially the new problem, which is the Y problem that they weren't aware of, and you start to present that, okay? So again, when you make the argument, you clearly present that. But by the way, this has to be true. It's not like a marketing trick. It's not like anything like that. Like, it has to be true. Like, this has to be real, okay? This has to be the fundamental truth. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They're just not going to buy it, right? So it has to be real. It has to be the truth, okay? So after you have presented the case and after you've built up the argument and clearly demonstrating how, hey, look, this is not your problem, this is the real problem, here is why, okay? So you just explain around the problem. The next step is you start to talk about the results, okay? So we've kind of touched on the problem, now we touch on the goal and the result. So obviously, you kind of like want to demonstrate, like, okay, this is the problem, this is how it looks like. How do you now get the result? Now, this is where you build up the argument on the other side and just start talking about the results. Right here, you just talked about the problem, you just clearly demonstrating how the problem is a problem and so on. Next step for you is just to talk about the result, okay? And here you are going to start to explain how is it that you are going to get them the result. And here you're kind of tying into the problem as well. So like you're going to explain like, okay, this is the problem, and then here is how we are going to solve this problem. And so just to go with this example, right, with the call that I just had, I said something like, okay, well, here is the problem, right? The problem is that all of these coaches, they try to install like a fancy marketing system on a broken offer. So fundamentally, you just didn't have the right things in your business to get clients. And so this is the real problem. Now, here is how I'm going to help you to get the clients, get to 10K per month, and get results. Well, how we're going to do that is, first of all, we are going to choose a different market. We are going to strategically choose the right market for your offer so that you're not going to have these problems anymore of like people saying that they don't have the money, you're struggling to book calls, and all of these bad things essentially. Okay, so this is what we do. It's really logical. So here I start to explain how am I going to help them achieve their goal, because the whole purpose of the call is not to talk about the problem, but is obviously also to make a promise. So it's pretty self-explanatory. After you've explained the problem, you just explain how you're going to help them achieve the goal. So obviously this is going to be part of the pitch, and the pitch is essentially the simultaneous explanation for why everything they've tried in the past failed and why your offer is going to work and it's going to get them results. So this is exactly what we're doing right here. Now we are in the part where we're explaining how we're going to get them the results. So it's a logical argument. There's no like salesy pitch, there's no marketing, no sales tactics, nothing like that. It's just pure boring logic, because this is what clients are looking for. Like, they're not looking for you to pitch them to just use like, benefit driven language or anything like that. They're really looking for that rock solid, airtight argument that clearly demonstrates how you're going to help them get the result. That's really what they're looking for. You don't need any NLP, you don't need any sales strategies, nothing like that. If you just clearly present the arguments and it logically makes sense, they're going to be like, oh, that just makes sense. They just make sense. I have nothing to say to that. I believe in it. I believe that this is the best option for me, and I'm going to buy. This is this is what you want to do with your prospect. This is where you want to get them, essentially, right? So this is the fifth step. Again, I clearly demonstrate how I'm going to help them achieve the result right now. Okay, so we're going to get 10K per month because, we're going to do this, and that. And here's how we're going to change the offer. Here's how we're going to pick the right niche. Here's why this is not going to be a problem, because these people are going to have the finances. These people are going to want a problem because of X, Y, Z. So I clearly demonstrate how I'm going to help them achieve the result. Okay. So at this point, right, I've diagnosed the problem. The prospects truly understand why the problem is a problem. It just makes sense to them. And now they truly believe that I'm going to help them achieve the result. And they just see it. They just understand that I'm going to help them achieve the result. And now we are going to get into the next step where, we're going to start to use analogies to demonstrate a point. And obviously you're going to do this throughout this argument building phase, but this is just a simple way to get your point across the line, essentially. Okay. So, by using analogies to demonstrate a point is, just pretty much what I used earlier. So obviously in this instance, the problem was with the offer. And it's just the fact that the offer was broken, but all of these other coaches that you work with, they just try to install fancy marketing systems, write emails, webinars, blah, 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 when in fact, all of those will fail because they were built on a broken offer, which, the fundamentals were broken. So this was the problem, right? And so the analogy that I used at that moment is, I just kind of told her, hey, look, your entire business is a car. Okay, so what happens is you do not have an engine in this car. You just simply do not have an engine. So obviously, because you don't have an engine, you cannot move the car around. You cannot, drive the car. It doesn't start. It doesn't work. So it just doesn't work because the car doesn't have an engine. But what ended up happening with all of these other coaches is, your coaches, like, they try to polish the car. They try to change the whatever, like shift knob. They try to do like detailing on it. They try to change the exhaust. Maybe that was the problem. They change your tires, right? They tried all of those things, when in fact the real problem was that the car doesn't have an engine, and this is why it doesn't run. Okay, so if nobody before looked under the hood to see that there's no engine in this car, and the real problem is that the engine is missing, and what you need to do to get the car up and running is just to put an engine in. Okay, like obviously this is like simplified, but this is what I told her. And it's, by using analogies, it's like really simple to get a point across, because you're using simple things, like you're using simple terms and analogies that are really easy to understand to try to demonstrate like a more complex, complicated point, business related problems essentially, right? So this is why this is so powerful. This is the analogy that I've used, and again, by using analogies, it's a really simple way to get your point across and to clearly demonstrate the thing that you're trying to demonstrate, right? So using analogies, but this is going to be, again, done all throughout the argument building phase. Now, let's get into the last step, which is make the promise, make the ask. Okay, so what I mean by this is make the promise is, hey, look, you make the final promise in the sense that, okay, if the prospect wanted to get to 10K per month with their business, then you are going to make the promise, hey, look, at this point, obviously, you've presented the problem, the real problem. You have showed them how you're going to help them get a result. So at this point, you just want to make the promise. It's essentially like, okay, hey, look, this is how I'm going to help you get to 10K per month. Okay, so the whole process, the whole step-by-step game plan that I just showed you is going to help you to get to 10K per month in X months. Okay, so it's really important that you make a specific promise. You have an end goal, which is 10K per month, and then a time frame as well. Like, hey, look, within the next X months, you are going to scale to 10K per month with my help, because we are going to do X, Y, Z, and so on. So here is the promise. Okay, this is basically the promise. You just make the promise, and then obviously the next natural step for it is just make the ask. So make the ask is obviously just stating the price of your offer. Okay, so it can be something like, okay, so listen, for us, okay, to solve this problem, which is the real problem, and to help you get to 10K per month in the next 6 months, the total investment is X, right? Whatever the price of your offer is. So it's obviously, it's an obvious step. This is what you need to do, but this is the only thing that's left for you to do if you went through all of the steps that I just listed out right here, and if you're just clearly demonstrating your point. So again, by the time that I had this call with this client, obviously, like, I had hundreds of clients, hundreds of testimonials, hundreds of results, but I did not show any result, any case study, any testimonial. I did not show anything to this client. All that I did is I just clearly diagnosed the problem, and I just built up the argument that, hey, I'm going to help you solve the problem. Here's how I'm going to do it, and this is what I'm going to promise you. Okay, and the prospect truly believes that. Okay, that's the thing. Like, the prospect truly believed that, and they just clearly were able to see how is it that I'm going to help them, and why is it that the problem that they have is a problem. Like, I just build up the argument. Again, it's not about sales tactics. It's not about anything. It's just about pure logics. Okay, and again, I didn't use any testimonials, any case studies, nothing. Okay, nothing. And I just made up this argument, and they purchased on a call, paid in full, and they were like thanking me, like, oh my gosh, Gabriel, thank you so much for doing all this. It just makes sense. So this is literally what happened. And again, if you are new into your business, if you don't really have a lot of case studies, if you don't have a lot of results, that's not a problem. Because if you just clearly demonstrate a point, okay, if you just clearly build up the argument, and you just clearly demonstrate how you're going to solve the problem and how you can help the client achieve the goal, you are going to get the deal. Okay, pair this up with a lot of confidence and conviction, deal is done. You're just going to sell to them. So this is how it works. I hope you got value out of this video. Again, if you just implement this framework, you are going to sell to everyone. As long as you build the argument, you're going to be able to sell anything to anyone. So this is how it works. I have a pretty cool offer for you. So look, if you're a coach, consultant, or agency owner, you want to get more clients, okay? You want us to find out what is the real constraint in your business, and you want to scale, you want to get more clients. I have a pretty cool offer that is results-based. You can check it in the description down below. To be honest, I don't really care if you check it or not, but it's a pretty cool offer. So I thought that you might want to check it out because it's pretty cool. So just check it in the link in the description down below. Also, smash the like button on this video because YouTube is going to show you more videos just like this one that are going to help you grow the business. And smash the subscribe button on this channel because I'm going to post more videos just like this one. No fluff, to the point that are going to help you grow your business, get more high-ticket clients. Smash the subscribe button for me again, and I'm going to see you in the next video.